I do not think that, for he has complained of feeling almost suffocated, and asked why the Venetian blinds were not opened as well as the windows. In a word, said Mercedes, it was a way of assuring me that his abstinence was intended. And she left the room. A minute afterwards the blinds were thrown open, and through the jessamine and clematis that overhung the window one could see the garden ornamented with lanterns, and the supper laid under the tent. Dancers, players, talkers, all uttered an exclamation of joy, every one inhaled with delight the breeze that floated in. At the same time Mercedes reappeared, paler than before, but with that imperturbable expression of countenance which she sometimes wore. She went straight to the group of which her husband formed the center. "Do not detain those gentlemen here, Count," she said, "they would prefer, I should think, to breathe in the garden rather than suffocate here, since they are not playing." "Ah," said a gallant old general, who, in 1809, had sung. "Partant pour la Syrie, we will not go alone to the garden." "Then," said Mercedes, "I will lead the way." Turning towards Monte Cristo, she added, "Count, will you oblige me with your arm?" The Count almost staggered at these simple words, then he fixed his eyes on Mercedes. It was only a momentary glance, but it seemed to the Countess to have lasted for a century, so much was expressed in that one look. He offered his arm to the Countess, she took it, or rather just touched it with her little hand, and they together descended the steps, lined with rhododendrons and camellias. Behind them, by another outlet, a group of about 20 persons rushed into the garden with loud exclamations of delight. Chapter 71. Bread and Salt. Madame de Mercier entered an archway of trees with her companion. It led through a grove of lindens to a conservatory. "It was too warm in the room, was it not, Count?" she asked. "Yes, madam, and it was an excellent idea of yours to open the doors and the blinds." As he ceased speaking, the Count felt the hand of Mercedes tremble. "But you," he said, "with that light dress, and without anything to cover you but that gauze scarf, perhaps you feel cold?" "Do you know where I am leading you?" said the Countess, without replying to the question. No, madam, replied Monte Cristo, but you see I make no resistance. We are going to the greenhouse that you see at the other end of the grove. The Count looked at Mercedes as if to interrogate her, but she continued to walk on in silence, and he refrained from speaking. They reached the building, ornamented with magnificent fruits, which ripen at the beginning of July in the artificial temperature which takes the place of the sun, so frequently absent in our climate. The Countess left the arm of Monte Cristo, and gathered a bunch of muscatel grapes. "See, Count," she said, with a smile so sad in its expression that one could almost detect the tears on her eyelids, "see, our French grapes are not to be compared, I know, with yours of Sicily and Cyprus, but you will make allowance for our northern sun." The Count bowed, but stepped back. "Do you refuse?" said Mercedes, in a tremulous voice. "Pray excuse me, madam," replied Monte Cristo, "but I never eat muscatel grapes." Mercedes let them fall, and sighed. A magnificent peach was hanging against an adjoining wall, ripened by the same artificial heat. Mercedes drew near, and plucked the fruit. "Take this peach, then," she said. The Count again refused. "What, again?" she exclaimed, in so plaintive an accent that it seemed to stifle a sob. "Really, you pain me." A long silence followed. The peach, like the grapes, fell to the ground. "Count," added Mercedes with a supplicating glance, "there is a beautiful Arabian custom, which makes eternal friends of those who have together eaten bread and salt under the same roof." "I know it, madam," replied the Count, "but we are in France, and not in Arabia, and in France eternal friendships are as rare as the custom of dividing bread and salt with one another." "But," said the Countess, breathlessly, with her eyes fixed on Monte Cristo, whose arm she convulsively pressed with both hands, "we are friends, are we not?" The Count became pale as death, the blood rushed to his heart, and then again rising, dyed his cheeks with crimson, his eyes swam like those of a man suddenly dazzled. "Certainly, we are friends," he replied. "Why should we not be?" The answer was so little like the one Mercedes desired, that she turned away to give vent to a sigh, which sounded more like a groan. "Thank you," she said. And they walked on again. They went the whole length of the garden without uttering a word. "Sir," suddenly exclaimed the Countess, after their walk had continued 10 minutes in silence, "is it true that you have seen so much, traveled so far, and suffered so deeply?" "I have suffered deeply, madam," answered Monte Cristo. "But now you are happy?" "Doubtless," replied the Count, "since no one hears me complain." "And your present happiness, has it softened your heart?" "My present happiness equals my past misery," said the Count. "Are you not married?" asked the Countess. "I, married?" exclaimed Monte Cristo, shuddering. "Who could have told you so?" "No one told me you were. But you have frequently been seen at the opera with a young and lovely woman." "She is a slave whom I bought at Constantinople, madam, the daughter of a prince. I have adopted her as my daughter, having no one else to love in the world." "You live alone, then?" "I do,